I'm your host, Tess Brigham. So let's start cleaning up this Gen mess. Today, I'm talking with Tracy Ward, an award-winning HR executive who blends strategy with heart. In her role as VP of Corporate Culture, she led people and programs across 1,900 and plus more employees and multiple locations. Tracy is passionate about building workplaces that not only drive results, but also give people a true sense of purpose and belonging. Thank you so much for coming on the show.
Thank you so much, Tess. I really appreciate you inviting me. This is going to be fun.
So, you've held a number of roles in HR. So, what drew you to this field? How did you get to where you are today?
Well, I always knew I wanted to be in a position where I could help other people. And, when I graduated college, I decided to try out HR and see what I thought about it because I really love the idea of being able to help people with their career growth and the experience that they had in the workplace. And I just fell in love. So my trajectory was like a pretty straight line. I got my first position in HR as an intern and then loved that. And so then got my next full-time position once I graduated in HR, and then really just grew, climbed that ladder and started in an organization, basically as an admin assistant, and then moved my way with multiple promotions to being able to run the HR team. So that was really exciting, having that chance to take on more and learn and grow the department as well.
So, you've had what I would say is like everybody's, right, when you're in high school or college, what you think your career would be, right? I pick the thing, it works for me, it's perfect, and I just move my way up. But did you ever have any moments of like, well, maybe it's not HR, or does it feel like, no, it's always aligned with what I wanted to do and who I am?
It's funny because when I actually started college, my degree was going to be bioengineering. That's what I enrolled under. And so it was just this complete,
That's very
epiphany
different.
during my first year that a lot of this math and science, I thought I liked it, but I guess I don't like it so much. So, but I was really attracted to psychology and sociology, and my resulting degree was actually in sociology with a minor in law, which suits itself very well to what I ended up doing in HR. But just the idea of working with people and how to, there's similarities, but also differences and uniquenesses with different people. And so I just love learning about different cultures, whether that's, cultures in different countries, but also cultures in organizations. It's always different. And you can create your own secret sauce or create your own special culture, by being intentional. And that's what I really enjoy about being able to work with different companies.
So, yeah, tell me more about that. What does that mean? When you think about corporate culture, how do you see that? And if someone comes to you, how do you build that intentionally?
Yes, it's a good question. I think culture starts with, your company values, the core values, your mission, like the purpose of the organization. In San Diego, we're fortunate to have a lot of biotech organizations, and so they're purposeful. They're trying to save lives and improve health outcomes for individuals. So that's very compelling. Lots of
Yeah.
people want to work in that industry because they feel like I can really make a difference for someone, being able to maybe live longer or, live healthier or things like that. But culture is also the informal ways that you do things. And so I think it's really helpful when organizations are clear about their norms, especially for someone coming into an organization. They don't know those, things that are kind of not said. They're just informal things, the way that they do things around there. And if you're not intentional about explaining that to people, there can be misunderstandings. And that's why I feel like having a strong onboarding process is really critical to set up employees for success. And then making sure they're having critical conversations. So examples of that would be, how does your manager prefer to have communication? Are they a face-to-face person? Do they prefer, you sit down on a daily basis and touch base, or do they prefer, you sit down once a week and go through things more in depth. But finding that out at the very beginning can be really helpful to
Mm-hmm.
allow you to be able to communicate as effectively as possible. And I think those are some of the things that help set up someone for success when they have that awareness right away instead of like learning the hard way.
Yeah. Well, it's so funny when we think about culture, and I thought about going to another country, right? And you go to another country and you don't know anything. If you've never been there
Mhm.
before, you have no idea. And so, yeah, you'll make a lot of mistakes. You'll, maybe offend someone, like something will happen. And what I think is so interesting about that, it's the same thing with companies where how does that culture respond to you? So if you go to a city where people are just annoyed with you and dismissive of you, then you're not going to want to go back to that city. You're not going to enjoy it. It's not going to warm you, right? And we all have these experiences where we go somewhere to a foreign country and we're embraced, right? And it just you have this love for it forever and ever and ever. And I think that and I don't know what you see, but one thing that I see a lot is managers and leaders not getting how little that 22, 23-year-old really knows about work
Right.
and the culture. And so it's that, fish doesn't know they're wet. Like they don't know what they don't know.
Hmm.
And so, because I'm curious how, because it sounds like what you're saying is it's really the responsibility. You can tell me I'm wrong, but it's really the responsibility of the organization to help the person who's onboarding understand what's going on. And that's not everybody's belief.
Right. And I don't think it's necessarily that, they mean to do it. It's
Yeah.
just that it's certain things are so innate to them because they're experienced that they don't think of what it's like for that new
Yeah.
person. And like a quick example is, you might be in a meeting and then ask someone to put together a deck. Well,
Mm-hmm.
do they know that you mean a presentation on this topic? Because maybe some of the terminology that's thrown around
Mm-hmm.
is new to that person. So sometimes in a company, you can, maybe have your own list of, words and phrases. What do these things mean? Point me to examples.
Mm-hmm.
That could be a way to socialize them, to understanding the different terminology within the company that they use. But it can also be making sure, do they know how to use the right equipment? Do
Mm-hmm.
they have they used some of these systems before? Because they're given access, but if things maybe aren't shown to them, do they know how you want a spreadsheet formulated or different
Mm-hmm.
things like that? And
Yeah.
so that's where, sometimes it can be helpful for the manager to maybe assign a buddy. And that way it's more of like a peer,
Mm-hmm.
someone who, is maybe newer to that experience of being a new employee, and so they can then share the ropes and teach that individual how to get acclimated.
Yeah. So, what are some of the generational trends that you're seeing? Especially when it comes to engagement and retention. What do you see? I mean, do you see that there is a generational issue? I mean, or does this come up often, or do you feel like, nah, not so much? It's not a big deal.
I think that there are generational themes that do tend to
Mm-hmm.
come up. Examples being, folks that are younger, maybe they are more, purpose driven, mission driven. They
Mm-hmm.
want to work for organizations that have really clear values, that value that work life integration. They are really looking for more flexibility than maybe generations.
Mm-hmm.
I'm a Gen X, and so I think we were more accustomed to,
Yeah.
kind of just you kind of do what you need to do, and you work really hard. And I think some of those types of things are, that's changing. The philosophy around that is changing, but I think it's a good influence because I do now see Gen Xers or
Mm-hmm.
even older generations that are also, I think, embracing more of that flexibility as well and seeing the value of it and how it benefits them. Their mental health. I think mental health is a huge issue in
Mm-hmm.
the workplace. And I think people are understanding that it is really important to avoid burnout and to do the self care and to figure out how do you fit those things into your schedule.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, so when you look back on your early career, what do you think could you compare? Because I too am a Gen Xer. And so what do you see now versus what it was like for you when you first started?
I think now I notice that employees are more open to be more vocal and to
Mm-hmm.
ask for things that they feel they want or that can help them, which is a good thing. I think communicating how you may want growth or you may want to pursue a different position, it opens up that conversation to be able to allow you to take those next steps.
Mm-hmm.
I would say that probably earlier in my career, I was a little more hesitant to,
Mm-hmm.
ask for those things. I would offer to take on responsibility, but I think I would say for myself, I was a little more reluctant to
Yeah.
bring up, and ask for some of that support until
Mm-hmm.
I got a little more comfortable, in the role and in the company, and established more of those relationships where I felt, that was a safe place to ask for that support. And then I was able to receive it. But I think it's part of that building that trust.
Yeah. Yeah. I often think about, because I go through this myself, and I often say that if I did not do the work that I did, I would be just like other Gen Xers who's like, what's wrong with these young kids? Why can't they, And I think that what's a very interesting shift, and please tell me if you see something different, but it's the shift of young people are coming into work today thinking they think about themselves first and then they think about work. And I really felt like when I entered the workforce, it was work first and then everything else I'll figure out. And if work is good and working for you, this other stuff, the rest of your life will work out. And I think that just this mindset shift is the thing that really seems to be creating a lot of tension around what mindset do you go into when you start your career.
Hmm. I would agree with that. I believe it has shifted, and it was always work first. And I've been working my entire life, and so um, my whole adult life it was always you put the work things first, and then you work around it. And if work things come up, you just do the things, and you
Mm-hmm.
make sure it's all taken care of. Whereas I do see the boundaries being more something that individuals are more firm on. They'll
Mm-hmm.
say, well, I was planning to work this amount of hours. I have other things that I plan to do. And so this can wait until the next day.
Yeah.
Now, granted, I think we always want to take it on an individual basis because I think generalities are helpful to understand, but then it's also understanding the individual,
Yes.
what's going on with them and all of that. And there's also such differences in how people communicate on an individual basis.
Mm-hmm.
So I think also knowing that sometimes if someone is direct, maybe that's their style, but also helping to explain to them, this is how I prefer to receive communication. And then that helps to make sure that you are not misinterpreting the communication.
Yeah. So in your career, what are some of the biggest challenges that you've seen? Biggest challenges, greatest lessons, however you want to call them, that you've seen in your career? Yeah.
I think right now I just see companies being pretty lean in a lot of cases, and
Mm-hmm.
workloads seem to be really high. I think there can be stress and pressure on individuals to get everything done. Um, there just seems to be a lot coming at people, and the amount of information overload
Oh,
because
yeah.
you're getting it from everywhere. You're getting it, on the news, on TV, on the radio, through podcasts, through all of this email communication and things like that. And so um, that can be overwhelming for people. And I do feel like sometimes I just see that there is kind of that, like you can tell someone's kind of nearing burnout or that there
Mm-hmm.
are a lot of things going on with them because they may be taking care of, the work things, but then things on the personal side. And you also have sometimes individuals where they're taking care of children, but maybe also aging parents. And so there's just a lot of different needs that they have going on all at the same time.
Mm-hmm. So what would you recommend? Let's say that's you're a Gen Xer and this is where you're at, burned out. You got parents that are struggling, maybe have kids. What do you recommend that people, I mean, I would assume that you recommend going and talking to their manager, but what else could someone do? Because I think that's, sorry, I'm going to answer this question with my own question. So, because I do think that, right, that people, one of the biggest things that I see is people don't know all of the resources that are out there for them until it's way too late.
I absolutely agree with that. And it's one of the reasons that when I'm working with clients, because we do consulting for
Mm-hmm.
companies and handle their HR or support them with that, but coming up with a communication calendar for benefits,
Mm-hmm.
reminding employees of the different benefits that are in place, I think is hugely valuable because sometimes when they go through open enrollment, it's an overwhelm of all these
Yeah.
different plans and things, but they don't fully understand them. So being able to share that information on a periodic basis refreshes it, reminds them that these great things are there, and then they can take advantage of those things. And I think for employees, it is really good to ask about, what things are in place. And if there aren't benefits like an employee assistance program, that's where it's an opportunity to ask the company that you think this would be a great benefit for them to provide.
Mm-hmm.
Because having a confidential place to be able to talk about things or to be pointed in the right direction for resources, I think it's really hugely valuable. And I'm seeing some really strong companies add to the number of sessions that are available to employees, which
Oh,
I think it's a really good thing to do,
yeah.
because 3 sessions is only going to get you so far. And if you can up that to a
Uh-huh.
larger number, or even for the company to look at other benefits that can help to support people that are juggling a lot of
Yeah.
different things, I think all of that can be really valuable.
Yeah. Well, 3 sessions. I always thought the standard was 6, which I thought was low as well. But 3 is really,
Sometimes I see it'll be like the base plan will be 3 sessions on a particular topic.
mm,
So, like for example, if you had financial issue, you could get 3 sessions, but if you had a death in the family, like that could be a separate 3 sessions.
got it.
So it
Got
might
it.
be something like that, but it's very minimal
Yeah.
for, most individuals. You can't get through something just in a couple of sessions.
Well, I can also imagine for the employees, right? They must just look at that and go, 3 sessions. This isn't going to fix this. And then boom, done.
Exactly.
So what do you do to, how do you expose people? Because to me, I feel like it's almost like you have to have all of the benefits and everything that people have available to them in a giant wall that they have to walk by every single day and then until it finally sinks in. So what
Mhm.
do you recommend? Right, you're right, open enrollment is kind of a overwhelming experience.
It is. So sometimes we've gone old school with
Mm,
companies and we've actually printed the whole
yeah.
benefit guide with all the information and resources. And the nice thing about that is then they take that home or
Hmm.
they have it, maybe out on a table, and I'll put them in the lunch rooms, break rooms and things, because sometimes you weren't necessarily thinking of looking at it, but it was there. So then you pick it up and start
Hmm.
thumbing through it. Also, for companies utilizing their SharePoint site, it's another great way to point them to lots of benefits and resources that are available. So
Hmm.
you turn on your computer, if you're sitting at an office, that's a nice way that it just pops up on your home screen and maybe
Hmm.
prompts you to kind of poke around a little bit, when you
Yeah.
have time.
Yeah, I do think that that is a huge, and you can tell me if I'm wrong based on your experience, but I think that's been a huge shift is younger people are coming into work really looking at everything, right? Looking at the benefits. What is the co-pay? What is this? What is that? I mean, me, I was just like, what's the salary? Okay, great. Now I'm going, right? Because I was in my 20s, like, I don't go to the doctor. Do I even need health insurance? And it was my parents that are like, yeah, you do, you know,
Right.
but but is that what you see as well? Or do you see younger people that, are much more interested in, well, let me learn about what's available here?
I think they are looking at the bigger picture.
Yeah.
And, they do ask about health benefits, about retirement plan. I think
Mm.
it's great that they're asking those
Yeah.
questions, but they also ask a lot of questions about the time off and the flexibility that's offered
Yeah.
and, you know, um, maybe things related to wellness. How
Hmm.
supportive are you with, different programs or gym memberships or things like that. I have individuals I know who work for companies where they have an on-site gym and they use it constantly.
Hmm.
And that's a differentiator for them. Like they don't want to have to go travel somewhere else to use a gym, but if they can do it and it's convenient, and also if you could do it with your coworkers, right?
Yeah.
Sometimes they go to the gym and they play volleyball and they interact with, their coworkers, which makes it really fun as well.
Yeah. I had a client, this was during the pandemic, and he was very, very high up at one of the big tech companies around here. And he was like, I realized my job sucks. I really just enjoyed seeing everybody, going to the gym, me, like he just, and he enjoyed the meetings that he went to, the travel, the people. That's really what drove him. Like what he was doing wasn't that, okay, that's what I did. But it is interesting. I think a lot of times organizations, they forget that, yeah, I mean, this is really what gets people excited and wanting to go to work, because there are all of these, they're stimulated in all these different ways, and it's convenient, and right, all of it. I mean, I'm sure during the pandemic, with all of this was another big thing with my clients, were especially the single men that didn't cook. We're like, oh God,
Mhm.
I'm gonna have to make my own meals. That whole
Right.
thing. But I think a lot of times people forget. I think some of the tech companies went overboard and it became really excessive, and so excessive that people couldn't really compete with that. But those things do matter. They really do. And that could really be the difference between someone, really loving this job and someone who's just miserable the entire time. Same job, you know?
Absolutely. I think the coworkers, the people that you work with, is one of the big things that keeps an employee there with an organization. It's the relationships they build. Their supervisor is a key part of why people stay.
Yeah.
It's a huge thing, but it's also, do you have a best friend at work? That's one of the
Hmm.
questions that Gallup had. As far as like why people are
Oh.
engaged and stay with the company, because and I've seen it. I see, two individuals go to work, but they're always having lunch together or taking their breaks together. They just have a bond and they look forward to seeing each other. And I think it's a huge thing of why they want to stay there, is because they know they're going to work with good people and,
Hmm.
have those shared experiences. Um, but the more that companies can tie purpose into it, I
Hmm.
think that's a more lasting way to keep people there because they see the impact of their work. It's
Yes.
important, it's meaningful. They see how they contribute to something bigger. And the vast majority of people want to do that, regardless of what their generation is.
Hmm.
We always want to feel like what I do matters. But it is really fun and exciting when you can do that with other people.
Yeah. So how do you balance all of this, right? Because I can imagine you're the person in between. You're the person in between the organization, the company, with a set of leaders that are really like bottom line. We got to make these metrics. We got to make this amount of money, and then you've got this other side of it of having, inclusive, intentional engagement experiences. So how do you balance those two things? Because what I see a lot of now is that, yeah, in order to create more of that work life balance, it does mean that maybe your bottom line will look different. And maybe, I don't know. But in the yeah, to create more time and space for people does mean that deadlines aren't going to get made as quickly as you want them to.
Sure. Yes, it is. It is definitely, always calibrating.